Do you want to become a permanent part of the channel? Check out the Alliteration Gaming Patreon. Here you'll find different tiers that all let you get involved in my videos, as well as provide you with a shout out, exclusive Discord access, and the ability to see my content early and ad free. Now if you're new here, you're gonna need an account on the UGN site. This will let you sign up for events, locate stores near you, and of course accrue those redemption points to use in the loyalty shop. You can even snag yourself 50 bonus points right now if you let me refer you. Until August 30th, when you're signing up, just click on content creator and type my channel name in the box. Regardless of how you do it though, thanks for being part of the Alliteration Nation. Now, let's get on to the video. Good evening, my dearest viewers. Welcome to another Alliteration Gaming video. My name's Levi and we're doing another deck commission. This one's gonna come off my patron Moo, and they want a Mimic deck, a little green card man. Specifically off of the evil symbol. They said they had played Chaos Mimic at a provisional this past weekend, and they felt it a little lacking. They felt like when they weren't finding Twisting Azure Inferno and training weights at the same time, the deck wasn't really pulling a ton of weight, pun intended there. So we want to go off of the evil symbol because we love twisty surroundings. They really said they really want to play some twisty surroundings, and I'm super here for it. I think as a character that wants to play green cards, this is definitely one of the best ones you can find. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Mimic. Mimic is really sick. He's potentially an 8-hand size, 25 health character. Starts at 6, but every time you check one of these lovely assets, you gotta go grab any attack that you want from your discard pile, and I think that's awesome. He gets to once per check commit one of his assets as a foundation, and when he commits assets he gets to give or reduce damage. So a lot of great things going on with this guy, and all of this text on him leads to some very interesting deck builds. If you haven't seen a Mimic deck yet, take it in, because we're playing almost as many assets as we are foundations because we got a lot of good ones. We're looking at a 61 card deck here, so almost a complete, like, you know, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3 split between our 3 card types, with just a few more foundations in the lineup. But before we talk about any of these gray and green cards, guys, the orange ones are the most important ones, so we'll start there. First thing you got to know, we have a tongue whip symbol, so we're just going to play 4 of it. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is one of the strongest attacks in the entire game, and does a really good job at setting up either the rest of your moves to kill, or coming in at the end of a string to kill them. If you find multiple of these, most of the time you are dealing serious damage or winning the game. Those are just kind of the rules. Next up, one of the best pieces that Evil gets for Mimic is Electromagnetic Stomp. This card is super awesome. Lets us lose 2 health to ready an asset. There's a lot of really good targets here, like our box of babies, our training weights. So many good things we can do. Trigger if we use it to pass a check, and then also commit it. Just really good stuff going on with Electromagnetic Stomp. It's also got stun 1, and if it ends up in our momentum, we can just grab it. It's a pesky little low attack. It's got a great block. We can grab it from the momentum on either player's turn, so it's also like an emergency low block we can pick up as a 1 low. Very good card. Next up, let's look at Zipline Dart. This is another one of the things that I think Evil Mimic really benefits a lot from. This just says if you've got an asset, it's 2 speed. We always have an asset. This is a printed 6 mid for 5, essentially. And then it says your next slam tech or weapon gets 2 speed. That is every move that we've got except for Tongue Whip. We don't get to give Tongue Whip speed, which is a little unfortunate. But this just being 6 mid for 5 it means it's like our best poke ever. And when we're ready to lay down the serious damage, we get to pass 2 speed to Trigger Transformation, because this card is a slam. This card's insane. This is our signature Mimic attack here as a 7 diff, but it gets -1 difficulty for every asset. Caps at 3. So if you have 3 assets, it's a 4 diff best case scenario. 4 diff, 5 mid for 6. It's going to get a damage for every asset you have, and if you've got some momentum lying around, you can build a trigger from your discard pile. That's basically the best green card inside of our deck, so this is a really good card. You can play this early, like mid game, if you have momentum, just to like get a free asset. And I mean, it's 5 mid for 6. Like, it's not easy. It's 5 mid realistically for way more than 6, because you're going to have a few assets. 5 speed is really good. This being like a base 6 speed, this being a base 5 speed is really good stuff. Most of the time this is your kill condition, and a lot of your attack strings are going to be set up towards like, oh hey, at some point I checked an asset, I'll go in my discard pile, I'll grab a Trigger Transformation, and now I'm going to play my string, and you have to keep in mind that I have this Trigger Transformation. And I'm going to play my string to just set this thing up to kill you, albeit like I can open with a tongue whip, put a thing in your pool, that's like 1 speed to my transformation. I'll play a stomp, stun 1, that's like 1 speed to my transformation. I'll play dart, give 2 speed to my transformation, 7 mid for a million is great. You can also go in there with a net gun surprise, open with a little bit of stun 2 action. Again, sets up your bigger moves to do some serious damage. I like this card a lot. It's also really good like little defensive tech. Evil struggles a lot to defend like via like speed reduction and good blocks, so getting like cute little responses that kind of mess up our rival, this sitting in our card pool does a really good job of, you know, just keeping them like wary from attacking us. I think this is a solid tech card all around. The last attack is Piercing Needle. I also think this card's very good in our deck because it is essentially a 6 mid for 3, and then we can put a bunch of damage on it with our character. Our character is amazing at putting damage on our attacks, so speed is the name of the game here, right? This doesn't have speed buff, but it does have stun 1, this stuns 2, this gives itself speed, this gives itself speed, you know, like that's kind of the name of the game with our pokes. Poking with this as like a 6 mid for 3, commit an asset, now it's back to being a 6 mid for 5, is really good. EX3 is also like a really fat number. It's got the cool momentum things as well. This card just like does a ton, has a great block. Piercing Needle is like just like a super underrated card in my opinion. This card has nothing but amazing words on it and way too many of them. Next up, let's take a look at our assets. We're going to start with Trigger because it is the most important one in this deck. It says that if you're Mimic, which we are, we get to just give +1 to a check every single time, every single turn, and it's playable while committed. So we can use Mimic to pass it for a check and then also give +1 to that check. So Trigger is effectively always 2 foundations for us, which as one card is really good. It's also just got a really sick ability to just kick itself out of here, ready one of your foundations and draw a card. Now, like sometimes if you're Mimic, you know, you want to make sure you've used this response before you use this response, because since you're Mimic, losing this to ready a foundation is kind of like an even exchange because you could just commit this as a foundation anyway. But if you're like stacking up over, you know, across multiple plays, because Mimic only lets you commit 1 thing per check, so it's very good. But for the most part, we're Mimic, and this gets to be 2 foundations, and that's the best part about this card. Our other our second most important asset is Training Weights. This card is amazing. You can essentially commit this for 1 damage for each time you've played this Enhance, and then it's got 2 abilities that ready it either by committing a foundation or discarding a momentum. So you commit this the first time and it's +3 damage because Mimic responds for 2 damage. You ready it somehow, you commit it the next time, it's +4 damage. Goes and goes. That's a lot of damage really fast out of nowhere, and it's super duper strong. This card's really good. This card is actually the reason why we have to play a reasonable amount of foundations in the deck as well, because we need them to commit to ready our Training Weights. This is Mimic's bread and butter right here. It's super good. And then Box Full of Babies is our third 4 of here. Really good. We can draw a card and discard a card because we're not May, which is totally fine. That's still a really good ability. On top of just commit to give your tech or weapon 1/1, which I think is everything but Tongue Whip or Transformation. Everything but Transformation and Tongue Whip. Our other moves are all tech or weapons. So we get to give them 1/1, which of course is 1/3 when we commit the asset because we're Mimic. Box of Babies is super duper good for this deck, and one of the reasons I wanted to go for a pretty like tech weapon heavy lineup here. Zipline Dart is really flexible because it also affects slams, but I think that Box Full of Babies brings so much stat value to this deck that I really wanted to cash in on the techs and weapons inside of my lineup. Past that, we have Twisty Surroundings as our 3 of. This card is amazing. Now it's a terrain, which means that only 1 terrain across both players can be in play at the same time. So we're not allowed to run other terrains, and we also really hope that our rival does not play a terrain because it means that it'll kick ours out when they play it. But when this card is on the field, it's extremely powerful. We can commit it to give our rivals attack checks -2, checks when they're playing attack. They're allowed to fail them, which is super fine. Usually what this is going to say is you either commit to discard an attack from their hand, or you commit this to make them commit 2 foundations. Both of those outcomes, absolutely astounding. We love Twisty Surroundings. If you draw extra copies, it's got Breaker 2 on it, man. Keep that bad boy in your hand and Breaker 2 the heck out of them. It's so good. And then of course, like the main, I should say, enhance on this thing is that you can discard a momentum to change the zone of the current attack to any other zone. Both players can play this ability, and it is playable while committed. So it might make your rivals blocking life a little easier sometimes. It might make your rivals your own blocking life a little easier sometimes. You know, that's a give and take ability, but for the most part, this just says that you just make them fork over an extra attack every turn or commit 2 foundations, and that's fantastic. Past that, we got a ton of 1-ofs, man. Aerie is a really sick 1-of. She readies our foundations and makes sure that we don't die. We get to survive at 1, which is really awesome. Kota is pretty cool in this deck. His lose a health to give a low or water attack 1 speed only works on a couple of our things. It's just the Tongue Whip and the Electromagnetic Stomp, unfortunately. But for the most part, we play him for this response here. When you completely block an attack, their next check's -2. They're allowed to fail it. You stack this up with Twisty Surroundings. Oh my god, it gets so annoying so fast. We have a 1-of Mimicry. This is a unique asset, so we're not going to play a lot of it, but it just says that it gets to become any foundation inside of our discard pile, which is like okay. There's not like honestly a ton of insane options for this. It's perfectly fine, just enough to play as a 1-of. You could play a lot of foundations to make this better, but I think that's like a lot of committal and probably not very much worth it. And then lastly, a singular League of Villains. I like this card a lot. It's just a cancel on face. If you find this one, some decks can't play the game against you, and that's very, very nice. And that's our 19 asset lineup here. And if you'll notice, of these 19 assets, only 4 of these in the box of babies are spams. The other 15 are non-spams, meaning when we go over to our foundations over here, they're almost all spams. I'm just trying to even out my builds here. Most of the time with your assets, you're going to want to go, your initial builds are going to be asset, maybe a babies, and then 1s and 0s until you start failing. So we have a lot of 0s here. We got 11 of them. This is just good speed reduction. This is good speed pump, which our character lacks, and this is a little bit of good damage here. I'm opting to go with 4 happy-go-luckies here because this has just become my new obsession card. Our low blocks are pretty balanced, all things considered, but I couldn't really find a low block spam that I liked better than this card. It was like this or like serum bullets for more 0s, which is pretty cool, but I like having on-demand low blocks. This combined with Electromagnetic Stomp just means that like we're actually hard pressed to die to like cheeky low attacks like Tongue Whip or like 1.3. So I think this is a super fine one in this deck. House of Cards is just a pair of these because they just hate on our rivals' momentum, and momentum hate is super important right now, and it's something that Evil struggles with. Triple Season Brawler, because this is just a solid spam. It was really between like this and Press Conference for me, and given that our character doesn't draw cards very much, aside from like his, response, pick up, and attack, I thought this was just a fine little piece of draw power. And then my only non-spams in here, I've got 2 Citywide Crisis so I don't die to like any kind of like bomb attacks, and a singular Sticky Balls because it's like pretty handy. You can even play like a 2nd or 3rd of these because I think the best thing for Mimicry to do, honestly, is copy Sticky Balls. And then there's a world where you can play more Mimicry and more Sticky Balls because like you have the Mimicry copy the Sticky Balls, flip it, now you can build a new Mimicry. I think that's cool, but it's just like a big 3-diff asset, and like this is already a 3-diff asset that I really, really want to play. And then I have all these 2-diffs I really want to play. I think it's a little too much, but I just think it's also fun that there's a world where like if you check this at any point in time during the game and you find your Mimicry, it can become a Sticky Balls, and that's just kind of dope. I like that if you only find one happy-go-lucky in rotation, you only find one in your discard pile, but you haven't built one yet, you can turn Mimicry into a happy-go-lucky and then use happy-go-lucky to pick itself up. That's pretty cool. There's like some neat plays, but for the most part, I'm not really worried about building my foundations to play with Mimicry. I'm worried about building my foundations to allow me to build my assets. So that's why it's just a pile of spams here. I have a lot of interesting things in the sideboard here. It's mostly attacks. I kind of explained the few other foundations I would think of when I was talking about the foundations. But attacks, guys, when I was sitting down to make this deck, I was like, there's a lot of ways you can go about this. There's a world where you can just look at Mimic and say, huh, he puts 2 damage on his moves. He puts even more with training weight. So what if I just built a throw Mimic deck? And Evil's got great throws. You can play the Clasp Facepalm duo. You can play Nebula Stairs, literally 4x those 3 bad boys. You could even play like some of the Shigaraki 3 throw if you really wanted to, just to have more throws. And then you could play like a bunch of full-on attack modes in your foundations and a bunch more +1 damage pumps and go for like a really cheesy strat. I almost went that route, but then I was like, nah, I almost literally just played like 16 throws and trigger transformation. But I was like, nah, I want to get a little more creative with it. But I also think that's a super valid deck type. So I have those in case you want to explore something like that. Vile Season is a really generically good card. I think that there's a world where you could play that over like the Net Guns or maybe the Piercing Needles. Again, I wanted to keep a hefty amount of techs and weapons in the deck though to work with some of my other cards like Babies and the Zipline Dart. But that's a super fine option. I think Winged Nomu could be super interesting in this deck just because like we're a deck that's able to put a bunch of damage on Winged Nomu, and any deck that can do that, I think it's worth considering. I just think that like Transformation as our primary finisher is just enough because we're able to go pick them up. But maybe like a one of Winged Nomu could be super spicy. And then Surging Crystal Darts I think is another really good weapon alternative to something like the Net Gun or the Piercing Needle, just because it's 5 base speed and you get to put a bunch of damage on it, and I think that's just like strong. It's got the weapon trait for our stuff that wants that. It gets to pump damage for the discard pile, which is not going to be very much for us, but when we check it, we also get to discard the top 3, which means that we're filling up our discard pile with more potential attacks to go pick up with Mimic. So I thought that was really neat and worth thinking about. I think you could also opt to go for like I thought I had it in here, but I think a cheeky like 1 or 2 of Low Blow could be very cool, just as an on-demand break or 2 to go pick up with Mimic. If you're like playing your string and you're like, yeah, I'm not killing you, oh, but I did check this asset. Well, I'm not killing you, so let me go pick up Low Blow, have my high block breaker 2, which is going to be really awesome against everything but Mirio. Although you have Twisty, so maybe it's not as bad. And guys, that's our little Mimic deck. I think this is a really sick way to play. I think you can play Mimic on all 3 of his symbols really effectively. I think he's got a couple different builds, because like on Earth you can also play like a good stuff Earth deck or like a heavy throw deck. You're doing the same thing on Evil. We have like the good stuff version here. It's slightly weapon focused, but I think it's a little bit more of a good stuff deck. We just have some interactions that we want to turn online. But I think his deck is very, very cool. It's so funny to just have like 5-6 assets on your board and then like 2 or 3 foundations and still be able to pass checks non-stop because of like Trigger and Mimic in tandem. It's really, really, really dope. The deck type works. It's proven. It's been seeing some success lately. I think Mimic is one of those sleeper characters that once we just figure out how to best optimize him, guy finds a lot of value in the right times, especially if our game ever slows down a little bit. If Mirio can like chill the heck out, man, this guy will be dope. But I think he's dope nonetheless, and I hope you have a blast jamming green cards with this guy, Moo. That being said, thanks just for making it to the end of this video, man. I really appreciate it. If you go out and take this Mimic deck for yourself, I hope you enjoy it just as much. And if you want an experience just like this, you can check out my Patreon down below. You can give me some money and I can make you a deck and it'll be super duper dope. Above all else though, that's all the time I've got for today, but I hope I can see you in the next one.